What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Super Carmio. In today's episode, we're going to be accomplishing a milestone of sorts for the Miata Turbo project. We're going to be installing a standalone ECU. I've chosen to go with the Megasquirt Plug-and-Play 2 just for ease of installation, as well as just a ton of information out there, a great base map to go with it. So let's get started and get a new ECU in this thing. Alright, so here's the standalone we're going with. It's the Megasquirt Plug-and-Play 2 for the 96 and 97 Miatas. And then to go along with that, we're going to be using this IAT sensor. And then you have a serial to USB to connect to your laptop. And then a T-fitting just to connect your vacuum line, as this will have a map sensor and it's basically converting it to speed density. So we're going to remove the MAF and convert it to speed density by hooking up the IAT and then a vacuum line. Also, as a side note, there's another plug right here. This is the options plug, so if you want to configure any type of outputs such as a boost controller or solenoids and so forth. And then on this side you'll get your standard ECU plug. So whatever's plugged into your stock ECU will go into here. It's the same exact connector. We're going to get started by installing the vacuum line. So there's plenty of vacuum ports on the intake manifold, as you can probably see, but to run the shortest line, I think I'm going to put a T-fitting right here, and then basically have one line go back to this evap solenoid or whatever it is, and then one to this vac line that I'm running to the ECU through the firewall. Okay, so we have our evap, then we have a split, and we have our line that's going to go to the ECU, and then I'm keeping this port open so in the future I could hook up a boost gauge. So then you're just going to push this back line through the firewall and back behind the passenger seat. So once you get that back line through the firewall, you could run it underneath this trim right here, as you can see. And then we're going to lift off this carpet right here and expose the ECU. This is just for later Miatas. I believe earlier Miatas have the ECU kind of where the kick area is, so you probably won't have to do as much. So there's the stock crusty ECU. Okay, so after removing the two 10mm nuts, we'll just pull the stock ECU out. We have all the plugs ready to go for the Megasquirt, as well as the back line. Alright, so after you connect your 3 ECU plugs, we're just going to mount this Megasquirt with 4 self-tapping screws. And then we'll put the trim back on and then screw it back down. You wouldn't even be able to tell there's anything special back there. Next thing we're going to do is wire in the IAT sensor. So since this is temporary, I'm going to have a totally different intake system when the car is turboed. I'm just going to drop it inside of this air box underneath the filter. I know some people drill it into this intake tube, but I think that's kind of pointless considering this whole intake track is going to be different, and eventually I'm going to run it on the post intercooler side before it hits the intake manifold. But let's get started on that. Okay, so I'm just going to drop it in there and then put the filter back in and let the wire kind of seep out of the edge. And then we're going to connect it to this stock MAF connector. Alright, so you're going to connect the 2 pins to the pins on this MAF connector, number 3 and 4. The polarity won't matter. And then you're going to want to basically wrap this in some high quality electrical tape just to protect it from any type of moisture from getting inside of here. Alright, so with everything squared away in the engine bay, we have our IAT hooked up, our vac line. It's time to load the base map and try it out. Alright, so we're going to open up Tuner Studio and go to create new project, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to name it Miata for mine. And then you're going to basically detect the link between the ECU and the computer. So once it finds that, just hit next, and here are the default settings. I'm just gonna change my oxygen sensor and narrowband for now. I still have to change the wires from the MTXL output. But once you're ready, just press next, and you could test out the port if you want, but if not, just select your gauges and finish the setup of your new project. Okay, so next I'm going to navigate to the base map that was supplied by DIY AutoTune. You could get this on their website. I'll leave a link. And then you're going to rate it to the ECU. And anytime Tuner Studio says there's a setting that requires a power cycle, that basically means you need to switch off ignition and then turn it back on for your changes to take effect. So now I'm just going to save the tune as a different file, that way I don't overwrite the base tune. So I'm going to name it speed density since we're going to be doing a speed density conversion. So the first thing we're actually going to do is calibrate our TPS, or our throttle position sensor. And you basically want to get the value when you don't have any throttle applied, and then also wide open throttle. Next, we're going to calibrate our IAT sensor by going to Tools and then Calibrate Thermistor, and we're going to change the calibration to the intake air temperature, and we're going to select one of the common sensors, which in this case is the GM, and it already has our default values pre-populated, so we're going to write those to controller and close out. So that's basically all you need to set up speed density. I'm just going to save this kind of as our baseline and start up the car. And as you could see, we have a live view of all of our gauges, and we could also open up our fuel table or ignition and look at the cell that we're currently in. So as your load changes, you'll see that the cursor will follow to match that cell. So we have the car running on the base map, and it's starting and idling pretty well. However, the next thing we want to do is just make sure that the mechanical timing of the engine is matching the timing that Tuner Studio is seeing. So we're going to fix the timing at 10 degrees and then basically look at the crank pulley and make sure that it's also reading 10 degrees and adjust if necessary. So the indicator for the top dead center on my crank pulley is kind of worn and the paint is missing. So what I'm going to do first is just remove this crossover tube and the first spark plug, and I'm just going to manually check top dead center and then mark it on the crank pulley. Alright, so with the first spark plug removed, what we're going to do is put the car in neutral and then rotate the crank with some sort of dowel pin or straw or something like that, and basically just wait until it reaches top dead center, so whenever the item is at the topmost point, and then we're going to mark it on that pulley right there. Alright, so I have a wooden stick inside of my first cylinder and it's touching the top of it, and then what you're going to do is attach a 21mm socket and just basically crank your motor while watching the stick. You could actually see it go down during its rotation and then back up. And once it reaches the very top, so you could actually also visually inspect the top of the chamber and see that the piston top is there. You'll basically see that you have notches that correspond to 10 degrees before top dead center and then top dead center. You're just going to want to mark it visually to make it more obvious. So something like whiteout would help here. And just for reference, each mark on this little timing guide is basically 2 degrees. So you have top dead center, 2 degrees before, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. So let's get the spark plug back in here and fix the car at 10 degrees and then see how it's looking. So we're going to open up Tuner Studio again and go to our project and then go to ignition settings. And then where you see fix ignition, use table, we're going to switch that over to fixed and set it at 10 degrees. And then after we load that, we'll basically start the car and make sure our idle is at 850 RPM or so. If not, you could adjust the throttle body. So we'll hook up our coil pickup to the first spark plug wire. Then we'll attach the ground just anywhere it's grounded. And there's this awesome plug right here that will supply a 12-volt source. So then we'll just aim this gun at that timing guide right there. So since I noticed that my timing was heavily retarded, which is a problem, but I was able to correct it through Tuner Studio by advancing the timing by 16 degrees. You could either use Tuner Studio, or the conventional method would be to rotate the cam angle sensor, but either way should work. So to change this in Tuner Studio, you could go to your offset, and basically negative value will be advancing the timing, whereas positive will be retarding it. And after you're done verifying the base timing, don't forget to check the use table option in your ignition settings. And just a refresher guys' memory, this is the turbo that we're going to be putting on the Miata. It's a GT28 RS. Not this big boy over here, but this should be a quick spooling and pretty fun turbo. Alright, so the Megasquirt is good to go. We've got the base map loaded. We've just begun doing some tuning on the idle as well as adjusting the fuel tables. So what we're going to do next is basically install new fuel injectors, retune the car on that, make sure everything's running smoothly, and then start the actual turbo process. So stay tuned. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.